Let's get started. So we're trying to unlock donor potential, the donor potential that exists with each and every one of our organizations. Support your donors, on average, support 4.5 charities annually. So that support for your charities relies on those 4.5 donors, being one of those charities. It's really an interesting thing to think about. When you start to look at your donors, those you and those charities are make up the values, the views, the interests, and the priorities for your particular organization. That donor sees something in you that aligns with their values. That donor sees something in you that really fits within their priority of giving, because giving is a process that your donors go through each and every time they make a donation. They're thinking about, okay, if I'm going to be making a donation to this organization, what impact will it have? What impact has my giving produced for this organization over the past couple of years, and how is it going to move forward? Now, to make things even more challenging for organizations, there are 86,000 charities across the country. 86,000 charities that are competing for a set pool of donors. Now, we know that in most cases, giving is local. Giving has regional components to it. Giving has a component that ties in with, healthcare preferences, with educational preferences, with community support, and with cultural pursuits. So we start to look at all of these different elements and how these donors who are going to support on average 4.5 charities are going to be fitting into this network. 86,000 competing against all these different charities. It doesn't have to be 86,000. It doesn't have to be 8,600. It doesn't have to be 860. Even competing against 8 charities for that donor attention is very challenging. And so part of all of this is to have the ability to position your organization so somehow it continually appears on the top of a list and the top of mind for those donors that are currently supporting you. Because the hardest part is losing a donor and finding a way to replace that donor. How many prospects will you have to go through to actually find a way to replace that donor? So cultivating the relationship with that donor now and actually helping them advance is really important. But at the same time, you're always thinking about the potential of what your donors may be able to give to you and support you. And how can you be developing those relationships, the mindset of the donor, so that they can see themselves from being a good annual donor to becoming a mid-level donor? But the reality is that sometimes they don't even have to be a donor. We had a scenario where an individual didn't even know that the organization was a charitable organization. The individual began to talk to us about, so what is it that they do? Why is it important? All these fundamental questions. What are they going to do with the money? What's it going to look like? And as they went through this process, very quickly, they became engaged in what kind of impact the organization was going to have. And then they began to, process this. And within a very short span of time, realized that they were going to make a transformational gift, never having supported the organization, but being informed about the impact that they would have for this particular area, that they have an area of interest in, that they would be able to support. But how can you develop those mid-level, from the early stage annual donors to mid-level to major gift donors? And that's a part of what we want to look at by showing them how they can be making intelligent, strategized, tactical, smart donation decisions. And that goes from what we were talking about here about the art of the giving to the strategy around the giving, how they can be looking at smart donation decisions. Well, smart giving is something that actually was was coined by Dr. Russell James. He suggested that people should don't charities could raise more money if they can actually have conversations with the individuals who support them and like them and they're involved with the organization. If they can be, if you can demonstrate, if you can visualize for the prospects how much they can give and where that money can come from, because in the back of the donor's mind, there's always that question. Okay, I really like this project. I really like the organization. I really like you as the fundraiser. You're really great and you're doing wonderful things. But how can I actually fund this in the air to the extent that you're looking at? So when we this is old hat, annual donor moving to mid-level donor to moving to major gift donor to moving transformational donor. This continuum is probably the logical way to go about having a donor discussion once the person has sort of locked into what it is that they're interested in. But how do you know what they're actually interested in? How can you be putting the options in front of them around what might be a potential area of support? Well, your organization has been doing great work. It has programs, it has operations, it has capital initiatives, it has all these other aspects. But do you know what your donor is actually interested in? How can you be presenting these options to the donor? Whether it's an annual donor that they're going to be supporting a portion of an annual fund, or it could be a mid-level donor that starts to identify themselves and tie themselves to your organization in a more meaningful way. But how do you get that annual donor to go to a mid-level donor category and then the next and to the next? And so part of all of this ties right back into the whole communications that you would be imparting for your donors to really find out, what it is that really turns them on, gets them excited, brings out some of the best questions that they're going to ask. Why do you need this money? How are you going to use the money? And what is the long-term impact that is going to be seen? All that is looking at the impact in one direction. It's looking at it from the direction that, how can this actually transpire? So how can you impact the donor is the next level of discussion. What's in it for the donor? They'll say, you know what, I'm really happy to be supporting you. You are one of 4.5 charities that we support, and we enjoy supporting you. One of the things that you can be showing them and or asking them is to really get into the framework of, if you're talking to your donor who's giving you a $500 annual contribution, that's a great donation. This $500 annual contribution, if they wrote a check for it, that $500 donation is going to cost approximately $300. In this scenario, it's going to be the tax savings less the donation is equal to the cost of the cash donation. Keep one thing in mind, okay? This one thing is really interesting, that this cash donation was made with after-tax dollars. So the $500 that they put on their credit card or they wrote as a check is actually costing them probably around $700. So they've paid the tax on it, they've left with $500, and now they're writing a check to you. Whereas what kind of impact can you have for your donors by showing them not only the fact that they want to have a great impact for your organization, but still they can be looking at making a charitable donation of $500 that cost them $500. They get the tax savings, just like a cash donation, but they have the income avoidance inclusion factored in. So the income avoidance inclusion plus the tax savings less the donation amount creates a much more attractive donation for the giver. So this is a really good way of thinking of putting yourself in the position of being a donor. If you had to make a donation that only cost you $500, And it resulted in a net cost of just $240 versus you had to make a donation of $500 that really originally cost $700. And the net cost would be $300 or $299 in this situation. Which one would you pick? Would you pick the $700 scenario for yourself, or would you pick the $500 scenario? I know that to make me feel better, whenever I speak to a donor, I always want to find out from that donor how they felt after they made the donation decision. But by being able to educate, inform, and empower your donors around the best and smartest ways to give could be another step in helping you go and illustrate the benefits here, but more importantly, allowing you to take that conversation with the donor to another level. Let's see how this conversation, but just by illustrating what they've been doing annually, might be able to factor into moving them into the mid-level donor category. And that in itself is a really interesting transition. It is how they can be supporting you in a more meaningful way. And this is really about giving now. So for many of your organizations, the opportunity to be engaging with your donors around giving now is important. As well, down the road, we will be having conversations around how estate planning factors into this, how donations within wills and how bequests are factored into it. More importantly, last but not least, how registered investments can be also included in terms of future giving as well as current giving. But the idea here is the optionality, having options that are available to individuals so that those individuals can actually see for themselves, what the options are, not only for them to be supporting your organization, but for how they can support your organization. So we know that in our last presentation, we talked about the three options. If you give your donor three options, there's a high probability that they're going to be dropping one of those three. But if you can be, and for various reasons, price, area of interest, or things that really don't touch them, don't reach to them, don't speak to them. But there may be two other options. Of one might be on the programming side, the other might be on the operational side, or might be on a capital side, whatever it happens to be. They might just settle in on those two options. But being able to have those two options, the question in the back of their mind is always, so I see how much you need. How can I afford it? And from the annual donor perspective, if we can be educating them and illustrating for them so they can visualize for themselves how they can be making not only an annual gift, but how they can be moving to that mid-level donor category. And here's an example of just that scenario. Here's a mid-level. So wouldn't you love to see your donor move from a $500 annual gift to a potential major gift, the mid-level of $5,000? This $5,000 is based on the exact same, if it's cash, they've done it with after-tax dollars. They've already paid the tax on the $5,000. Whereas if they have doing it with appreciated assets, we're showing them what the impact is to them and what the impact they would have to the organization by increasing the size of their gift. Not only will it be factored into what the different asset may be. In this case, we've got a stock. The stock is appreciated in value from its original cost to its current cost. And then we start to look at, suggesting, what would happen if you made a $5,000 donation? And I'll show you exactly what the cost to you would be. Secondly, we can actually illustrate what the tax minimization would be. Thirdly, it's the opportunity of the impact that they will have for the organization with this $5,000. So the energy is there to actually say, you can use the tax credit that you're going to be getting to reduce your tax. But we know that tax does not drive philanthropy. What drives philanthropy is their association, the cultivation, the communication, the engagement that takes place, the stewardship that takes place that leads to this point, the impact that they will have with their giving. But we also know that as we move up to higher giving levels, the tax does play a role. But the fact is that if we had to sit and explain all the tax brackets and the tax benefits and everything else that goes along with it, or if we can help them visualize themselves in this in this situation, and they are now down to two organizations that they might be thinking about funding, well, they may turn around and say, well, what would happen because these projects are at a higher giving level, you're looking for more funding potentially from us. It never occurred to me that we should be thinking about not writing a check, but giving it out of different assets. I've heard about it. You've heard the scenarios as they've played out for other discussions with donors. They've probably attended events. They've seen scenarios of, other people who have actually made these types of donation decisions. They've actually engaged in conversations with their advisors, or you've done presentations with advisors for your members that actually illustrate, hey, you know what? The last 2-3 years have been very powerful years for you, the investment community. A lot of individuals have done very, very well by having their money invested. The message here is that they've done well with the investments that they have made, and those investments have grown. And the growth in the investments has two components to it. One is that the market value is worth more than when they started. And secondly, because it's a taxable capital gain, they're going to be owing tax on that. And the opportunity of actually having an impact with something that may have gone from this number to this number, that gives them the opportunity to actually explore how they could maybe make a $50,000 gift. Now, remember that if they were to write a check for $50,000, if they were to sell $50,000 worth of shares of this value here, that they're going to have to pay the tax on it. Versus if they were to transfer $50,000 in shares, this is what the net cost of their donation would be. Now, doesn't this number look better than this number? And each and every time that we present this to a donor, it just blows their mind. And it blows our mind too, because this is something that they get excited about. They get energized. They said, okay, so what I really need to do is sit down with my advisor and have a conversation with them about how this might be facilitated with this type of philanthropy to benefit the organization. But there are three legs to the stool. The first one is the donor and the impact the donor will have for your organization. And second is the advisor and the role that the advisor plays in helping their client understand, yeah, you do have assets, you have large buckets that you could be drawing from to be making these donation decisions. And third is you. If, as a charitable organization, these are the three legs of the stool. You have to be and see yourself as part of facilitating, not only explaining the impact of the donation for your organization, but also illustrating how the donor can benefit and tie that in with their advisors. So we've got a really interesting scenario here, and it goes without saying that $50,000 in pre-tax is a lot more. It's, I don't know, $70,000, somewhere in that vicinity. Could be more based on their tax bracket here. It's probably more than that. It's probably close to 80,000. But what we really want to see here is how do we go from this continuum over here to the holy grail of donations? That transformational donor comes in and it just changes everything. It changes the opportunities for you to be, engaging others in this way. It also it creates the opportunity for your organization to be building a foundational base for a capital project, for endowment, for anything, for other areas of interest. And then we get into this scenario. And this is here's the tax bracket. Here's the taxable income for this individual. So their tax bracket is at the 53.53% area. So the original amount for this individual to make a cash donation would have been $2.17 million. They had to have $2.17 million, pay the tax on that, and then wrote a check for $1 million to you, of which the tax savings would create a net cost of just around 500,000 versus using the pre-tax funding and transferring over to you where you sell the asset and the net cost is substantially less. And this is where putting your donor first, because your donor is there. They were there as a $500 annual donor. They increased their giving because you asked them to increase their giving. You began to show them the best ways to give. You began to walk them through scenarios that help them understand how they can have a greater impact for your organization, and how you are able to show them how they can have a greater impact, not only for their self, for themselves, for their families, for their others that are important to them, and how this can all be factored in. But it starts with a one gift. It starts with one gift, whatever that gift is, however small it is. You never, ever, ever know how that donor is going to turn out for you, and how with a little bit of education, engagement, that you're going to be able to empower them to take the next steps. So we see that technology plays a major role like it's never played before. We've just seen a number of data points. There are other data points that exist within your CRMs, how you engage with your donors, and there are many ways for them to look at how this can benefit them. But education now is very interactive. People are learning as much as they possibly can by going online. ChatGPT is helping individuals actually understand this equally as well. And we understand that as we are, as we built out Phil as an AI chatbot, as we're building out other AI modules that are really helping fundraisers, donors, and others explain not only what their organizations are all about, but also in a very interactive way, bring them into immersive experiences. And part of the immersive experience is being able to actually, personalize the donor journey story. How do we bring these scenarios around areas of support that you're looking for? We've had a number of conversations with organizations just like yours that we're saying, your website is great. You've invested a lot of money in your website. What's missing is the two elements. They've gone to your website, they've gone on this journey. You know that the numbers aren't really super solid, and getting them to look at things that they're interested in on your site, and then tying that into how can they support your organization without having to navigate all over your site for that donate now button. So one of the things that we look at is to have the ability to understand how they can support something at that mid-level major gift or transformational level by having it right then and there on the site where you're talking about your need. You tie the need in with the opportunity to support and engage those individuals along the way. But the whole thing here is, how can these impactful conversations translate to the betterment of your donors? Well, we know a couple of facts. 60% of North Americans don't have a current will who are over the age of 50. So that's 60% of adults do not have a current will. That's a big number. Is it a really meaningful number? It could be. It could be a meaningful number because the ones that actually have a current will, that have a charitable bequest built into it, only 4% of those individuals actually have a bequest incorporated in their will. And I know that we're not talking about, estate planning here, but a good part of major gift fundraising, of moving donors from one level to another, is really having an estate plan that actually factors in current giving as part of their giving strategies. Visualization, people are visual learners. People always look to things that they can see, that become a little bit self-explanatory for them, that they don't have to go anywhere. Think about all the people, think about all the times that you've gone on a real estate site and looked at a mortgage calculator. And what are you looking at a mortgage calculator for? To see what's affordable. Is this house affordable based on these criteria? All we're trying to do is your philanthropy affordable to you? Will you be able to achieve the values, the views, the interests, priorities, the lifestyle that you're accustomed to actually get to that point of making a transformational or major gift? And then the idea of transparency. What do these numbers really mean? I know they talk to me about tax credits and tax savings and reductions and pre-tax and after-tax. Is there somewhere that I can see this? Is there like a report that I could print out? Is there something there that helps me understand how I can be incorporating this in my planning? And then we get to what we look at, and hope I've been able to cover this off in the presentation today, are some of the actual steps that you guys are undertaking, incorporating, but you can continually look at this as giving is a very personal experience, whether it's a $500, $50, $5,000, $5 million, $50 million gift. It's personal. The bigger the number, sometimes the more personal it is. But we really want to explain what those experiences are for not only the organization and how the organization and its members benefit, but its community benefits, but how this benefits the donor and what the experience would be. How do you feel about your donation? Did you feel good about it? If you're not feeling good, tell me why. Let me go back and explain, because it factors into communication. Visualization. Like I said, people are visual learners. If we can be showing more graphs, charts that illustrate what the differences are and the benefits are of giving, why not? And these one-on-one meetings, we know that we can have one-on-one meetings just as we're having right now, or we can be meeting with individuals at a coffee shop or somewhere else where they can actually have a conversation with us around, where they're at in life. What are they thinking? What are their views about things? How do we factor into that? And can our goals align with theirs? The optionality, giving him 3 options, letting him, throw one away. Work with those 2 other options. How about that factoring into your giving as well? And the impact of having that optionality. So showcasing results. What results have they had? What results have you had from the interactions and the support that they have provided you over time? And how does that factor in? This allows you to get to a point of actually making a specific ask, but not really making a specific ask, because it's almost like a self-declaration at some point where the donor is going to say, yeah, well, give me a couple of proposals on those 2 options. And let me take that away. Let me go and talk to my advisor. But it creates that with the 2 specific asks, it creates the opportunity of you being tethered with that donor and that advisor. And so that is an important point that we're trying to make, is that you're making the specific ask and you don't, lose contact with that conversation. And the cultivation goes on and on. It goes from introduction to education to events to things that are taking place to the point of the ongoing stewardship. And how can you be ongoing relationships from your annual giving team to incorporating different cultivation strategies around stewardship? How does your stewardship, how do your tax receipts, how do your letters that you're sending out of thanks, how does that all factor in to connect, making that ongoing connection? And to get to a long-term vision, we are always looking at the steps that are needed to take. But if we can be looking at what's in it for the donor, how the donor can benefit and their families can benefit, and how with the impact that they're having with our organizations, I think we'll see a lot more success of helping individuals, especially with the wealth transition that's taking place from one generation to the next. And that's taking place very quickly and has been going on for the last 20 years. But there's been more wealth that's been created over the last 10 years that really changes the dialogue for how these families, how the advisors, and how your organization can participate. So I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be here and learn about having impactful philanthropy as a two-way street for your organization as well as for your donors. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you.
Julie said thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Tisa said thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, if that's where we're at, I'm thank each and every one of you for your time, and we'll look forward to our next webinar, which is next month, and we're going to look at naming opportunities and the power of naming opportunities and the metaverse. It's really exciting, and I hope to see all of you next month. So all the best, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you.